Welcome to the Food Junkies Food Addiction Summit.
Here we aim to provide you with the experience, strength, and hope of professionals actively working on the front lines in the field of food addiction.
The purpose of this summit is to educate you and increase overall awareness about food addiction as a disease with abstinence as the solution.
Every day for the month of October, we are sharing one inspiring speaker or highlighted food preparation video from the incredible Tony Vassallo of Moda Nutrition Inc. and the Real Food Revival Movement.
We have 4 weeks of interviews with the leaders in the field of food addiction, clinicians who are working on the front lines, registered dietitians and nutritionists that are working toward bridging the eating disorder and food addiction camps, and people just like you and me.
Here we talk about all things food addiction recovery. Most importantly, how to thrive rather than just survive.
So stay positive, make a change for yourself, tell others about your change, and hopefully the message will spread.
And as Vera always says,
the power is ours.
All right. Thank you guys for being here today with us again on the Food Junkies Summit. We're so excited to have Dave Wolfe with us. You guys might know him as Dietitian Dave. You probably know him from SugarX Global. We just know him as Dave, our colleague and friend, and somebody that we can ask for help whenever we need help. So welcome, Dave. Can you just give our listeners, who, many of whom are probably new today, who don't know you, just give us a background. Who are you? What's your experience in education? Why should we be listening to you today?
Yeah, sure. So real quick, grew up with food addiction all around me in my house. So I definitely identify with recovery. It's always been a part of my life. It wasn't until I was about, until my mid-20s, I was training with Esther Helga, and she's like, "You're probably a food addict." And I was like, "You're probably right." So I'm a trained registered dietitian. I've done Esther Helga's program in Iceland. I've studied under Bitten Johnson. I've worked in bariatrics. I was at one point in my life an artisan bread baker, so complete shift to where I am now. I'm sure we'll get into that. But now I'm one of the co-founders of SugarX Global. We're an online food addiction, sugar addiction recovery platform that's community-based. We run challenges, we run intensive programs to help people get free and really just to drop the guilt and shame associated with the disease of addiction, so that they can heal their brain and get out of food and into living. So that's kind of who I am and what I believe in.
Great. Can you tell us a little bit more about your personal recovery journey, like how food addiction has impacted your life and how old you were when kind of all of this started?
Yeah. So I would get home from school, like in kindergarten, it'd be winter. I'd have a park and a backpack on and a bunch of mittens and a neck warmer. And I'm from New England. I'd run downstairs with all that regalia and I'd grab 5 or 6 packs of fruit snacks. I'd eat them and I'd hide the wrappers. And I really didn't have an explanation for that. And so stuff like that happened. Later in life, I would get home from work. I'd just hit the pantry, get home from work. I'd hit the pantry. It was just a cubby. I would just open it. I was didn't want to open it. I just did. And I just kind of lost control. On top of all that, I've been on ADHD medication. I'm now off, but I was on medication for 25 years. So my appetite was really suppressed, basically from amphetamines. So what would happen is I would eat, I wouldn't eat until dinner. And then when I ate dinner, I would eat 3 adult portions of dinner to make up for the fact that I hadn't eaten all day. So a lot of people talk about intermittent fasting, I felt like I was doing it when I was 8. It just wasn't intentional. So, but yeah, so there's, just carb heavy themes. I was I would go to my friend's house and his mom would joke. He's like, "Dave, you only eat brown foods." And I would yeah, crackers, apple juice, hummus, mac and cheese, so this is definitely true. So it's funny. I think that I don't associate so much with the implications of addiction as a kid, more because I was on meds. So it didn't really present itself in any of the normal ways. Not that we really look at weight like it's one symptom, and it's a symptom that a lot of people face, but I never faced that symptom. So it didn't externally look like I had addiction. A lot of people who are food addicts, they wear their addiction. It's present. Everyone can see it. On mine, you couldn't see. So I think I didn't really come to terms with it till much later.
So do you
Right.
think this
Go ahead.
food addiction like led you into the bakery field? And how did you go from doing baking to dietitian?
Yeah, so I went to the program for culinary arts. I knew I was going to do the nutrition program. So like, and that's a didactic program, which means that it pre-qualifies you to go on to get your registered dietitian certification. So it's one of the only programs that's culinary focused that does that. So, so I kind of knew that. What happened was my freshman roommate was a bread baker, and I just got the bread baking bug. I love the art and the process, and it's really quite a philosophical endeavor to bake bread. To kind of create your own sourdough culture and to do so. It kind of like enraptured me. And then it's also philosophical in like the way that you do it. It's like you're doing hard work, but you have to do it gently. So I really like kind of embraced the Zen of it all. I didn't really realize it was destroying me until it was destroying me. And I've dabbled with trying to bake bread since then because it was my life. It was my hobby. It was like the thing I did for fun. So, and every time I did it, it wasn't even necessarily that the cravings got me. It's what got me was the like physical pain that I would have from eating bread. So even when I would like 100% whole grain rye bread, it would just wreck my system. So I was like, this is not happening. This is not going to work. So we kind of had a little bit of a divorce. I haven't really been thinking about bread for a long time, but we're like moving right now. And so I like went downstairs and I have like 3 KitchenAids like in a pantry collecting dust. And it's like, that's kind of sad, but it's not for me anymore. It doesn't serve me.
So in that same vein, then how do you go from culinary, dietitian, education, baking bread, all that stuff to you didn't even know food addiction was a thing until you were already at the InFact program. So what even like prompted you to say if food addiction is a thing, it's something I want to learn more about and potentially work with people on?
Sure. I mean, I knew food addiction was a thing. I just didn't know I had it. So my mom has been in recovery on and off for about 30 years. Most recently, she's been, I think her clean date's like 16 years ago. So like a long time. I was overseas between high school and college, and she came to visit me. Like I had the last seen her like deep in the throes of addiction. And then I came and she saw me like 8 months later, and she had been abstinent for like 5 or 6 months. And she was like a totally different person. So I was like, and we were dealing with like a lot of stressful situations. I was thinking about leaving school, and she was just like calm as a cucumber, just like, okay, what's the next thing we got to do? Let's do it. I'll handle it when I get home. And like, I hadn't seen that woman in a really long time because she had been in and out of the food for probably a decade. And the implications of that on a household is enormous. The chaos is just, you can't even describe it. It's just nutty. So I knew about food addiction. I just think that because of meds and because of, well, I mean, I think my mom did her best to feed us right. She was just basing it on the information that she had at the time. And a lot of those foods were probably the problems. They weren't overtly sugar, but definitely lots of grains, And so I guess I just did the assessment and was like, okay, like if you shake my family tree, a bunch of addicts just fall out. It's just like, that's the truth. So, okay, Dave, you're probably an addict. Yeah, you're probably right. Like I throw in the towel, like that makes sense. Looking back in hindsight at all the behaviors that I had, it was just like a moment where it's clarity. It's like, oh yeah, okay, you're right. And it was just kind of, that was my surrender. It was like a really peaceful surrender. Most surrenders aren't like that in recovery. They can be really ugly, but mine was really peaceful.
So then, when you went to school to be to become a dietitian?
Oh yeah. So the second
with
part
that
of the
intention,
question, sure.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So no. So like my family roots, my great grandmother, they are from Lithuania, and live in what are called shtetls, which are small neighborhoods, right? And like her responsibility was to cook for the village. So like it's in my blood to feed people. So we like get a rush out of feeding people. And I've learned through recovery that it's relatively codependent, but the truth is that I just like want to feed you. So I combined that with my desire to want to help people, and I ended up in nutrition. So that's how I got there. And then they taught me all these things, which I felt compared to where I'm at now, which are problematic and actually really cause a lot of harm. I think their intention is to reduce harm, but I don't know how much harm they're reducing. I think maybe they're postponing inevitable disease. But so there was a lot of conflict there. And then more recently, even the last year, I'd still been working in like a Western medicine modality. And for me, it was literally like an ethical battleground. It was like, what do I do with my conscience? Like with what I know from experience and wisdom versus like what they want me to know and apply. And they weren't the same. And so it was like really exhausting to have to try to do what they thought was the right thing, but which I thought was not the right thing. So it's become, I've now come to this place where I can do what I believe in. You know, like I have my own business. I can apply the principles that I believe in, that I see help addicts recover. And it's amazing because it's like, it's such a weight's been lifted off my shoulders. But they did not teach me this stuff in school. No, I didn't read it in a textbook. I learned it the same way that anyone who transformed their lives learns it. They learn it by doing it. You know, little by slow, you know, you pick up information. Each client you work with that has a struggle, that gets stuck, that has a failure, like that failure is designed to teach us something. Whether I'm willing to learn from that failure is up to me.
Yeah. So can you speak to, if I'm, watching this food addiction summit right now, and I'm really interested in finding out what is an abstinent food plan for me, I'm going to Google trigger-free nutrition and look up you. What's the process? How do you work with me? How do you help me find the right abstinent food plan for me?
Sure. So there's definitely like, I think everyone has bias. Like it's like impossible to be a human being without having bias. It's just like we have an opinion, right? Can't get rid of our opinion. So I definitely lean towards my mentors, which is primarily Bitten Johnson, and the people I work with, which is my mom Judy and Anna, and I think they're going to be on the summit at some point, so you'll get to hear from them directly. Anna's more primal. My mom's more kind of raised through the 12 steps, so her progression has changed pretty considerably, but in a gradual way over the course of the years. So I draw from all that information. So when someone comes to me, the first thing I do is I figure out what makes them feel guilty. What do they question, like debate? And then what are the foods that they romance, like rendezvous, secret lover, like what do you go to do alone? What do you hide the wrappers of before you get home? Like that kind of thing. And so those are our trigger points. And then once we have our trigger points, I believe in an abstinence-based model for the healing of the brain and for recovery. I feel like at least the people that find me want to do abstinence. They've tried everything else. So again, there's bias there, but those are the people that are looking for me. And so we work to getting rid of the things. And sometimes it's just rip the Band-Aid off. And sometimes it's staging people down, finding out where they fall on the level of carbohydrates that they seem to function well on. And for some people, it's 20 grams. For some people, it's 150 grams. And it's not as if I'm having people count, because I'm not. It's just a matter of giving them a framework that makes it as simple as possible for them, because we believe that simple is repeatable. Like if something gets complicated, I don't know if I can repeat it. And really with addiction recovery, it has to be repeatable, and also not boring. So those are kind of the frameworks I use. I don't have any like cut and dry rules. I think there are definitely problems that are definitely present. I mean, sugar is a psychoactive substance. I believe grains can be as well. And for most addicts, food addicts, if they come in as a sugar addict, it's a matter of time before they start kind of broadening the scope of their drug-seeking behavior. So they may come in as a sugar addict and over a period of time become a grain addict. Maybe they become addicted to certain fruits or what have you. It's a progressive disease. It gets worse. It doesn't get better on its own. So I think that that's important. And finding out where someone is, like, I don't necessarily need to remove everything for everyone. But I find for healing the brain, because I believe addiction is a brain disease, that if we remove these three things, grains, sugar, and seed oils, the brain has the best chance to heal. So I try to apply that, but I also have to see where the client's at, what the client wants. If someone's unwilling to do something, I guarantee you 100% of the time, they won't do it. So you kind of have to gauge where someone's at and then see, like, are you willing? No. Okay, cool. Let's do a little bit of this until you're willing, or maybe you never become willing. That's okay too.
I'm wondering if you can speak a little bit about volumatics. It's been coming up a lot lately in the interviews we've been doing. Do you work with these individuals in a particular way? And what are some things that you find suggestible for those of us that struggle with volume?
Yeah. So volume's funny, right? And this is the thing that separates food addiction from all other addictions. Some people will say you got to eat to live. Yes, I agree. You got to eat to live, but you don't have to eat Twinkies. Like, we need to be clear about what food is. But the other thing is that, so food is a substance, right? But eating is a behavior. So you're dealing with a substance addiction like cocaine addiction, heroin addiction, alcoholism, but you're also dealing with a process addiction like debt, gambling, sex and love, so you're dealing with these two separate monsters, so to speak. So we really believe in what's called addiction interaction disorder, which is like your house has electricity, right? And I could plug in my phone to charge it in any room. So each outlet is an outlet. So I need to be clear that when I'm switching seats on my Titanic, I have to be able to be honest with myself about that. And I think that's what a good coach does, is it teaches us how to be honest with ourselves. So volume is an outlet. It's an outlet that a lot of people have. I find that some volume addicts, when they control, or when those that appear to be volume addicts get some of the other stuff under control, they don't necessarily need to do things like weighing and measuring. It seems like a relatively small sect of people have to do that. But when those that have to do it, they have great results, right? They're confines. So for the people that don't have to do it, it feels like a burden, right? To weigh and measure. And for the people that do, it feels like freedom. So I think we really have to look at that experience, the perception of the end user to that. I think volume's hard. And I think that one of the reasons why is because diet mentality. I think that people have such a deep rooted software that they're running. That's just diet mentality, because that's the operating system that they've been running for decades. It's not something you can just flick a switch and diet mentality goes away. This is how you've been taught to think. I remember when I was coming off of meds, I realized that I learned how to learn on meds. I had to teach myself how to learn off of meds. I have to teach myself how to not think through the lens of diet. And so when you come in with a volume addict and they go into diet mentality, and let's say they choose a way of eating that avoids trigger foods, but they're still overeating foods that are technically allowed, right? Then we need to set some sort of guidelines that work for them. That may be weighing and measuring. It may not be. It may be when I eat pork rinds, I eat them in a small bowl. That's okay. It's just a matter of finding that space for the person. Again, willingness is huge, and then it has to be comfortable for the end user. If it's not comfortable, it's not going to last.
Yeah, I mean, just so many things you were saying, just light bulbs are going off for me. I mean, I remember speaking to you one time and we were talking about food plans, and you're like, oh, let me do the stupid food math, so that we aren't having to count macros or get really caught up in calories and that kind of thing. And so I just really remember appreciating that about your perspective on food plans from that, angle.
Right. And
yeah, go ahead.
And that comes from my exposure to 12-step model, working with people who were, this was even a while ago, were coming at me from places like Overeaters Anonymous or Glaciers, or whatever, and they needed that for their sponsor. So, I kind of fit that mold. And now that's one place I work out of, but also now this other space where people really can create their own food plan. They just need a little bit of guidance finding out where their sweet spot is. And unfortunately, the best tool sometimes we have is trial and error. There's no two ways about it. Like, how do you figure out where you fit on that curve? Well, you try a few and you read the results.
Yeah. Which sounds really scary when you think about people doing it alone, but knowing that they can come to this community-based program you have and obviously support them through those decisions and
right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Because I heard an addict once say, she says, I could probably recover alone, but I just don't want to. And I think that's the truth. I think we could do it if we really had to. It's just like, I just would much rather do it with people around me who can help me.
Absolutely. Okay. So we know you're an abstinence-based food
Sure.
dietitian, food addiction professional. We've heard you talk about abstinence food plans. Can you tell our listeners, our watchers, what does abstinence mean to you?
To me.
To you.
It means that just for today, I'm not going to put anything in my body that will harm me physically or harm my spirit. That's what it means to me. I think it means a different thing to different people. I also hate the word abstinence. It sounds so like sterile. It's like we much prefer like craving free eating or something that's like more lively.
Education as a teenager,
yeah,
right?
Yeah, it sounds like it sounds very, oh, that sounds awful, right? But I think that the people that have experienced the difference that it makes, that's it. Like, you see someone 5 days clean, 6 days clean, 7 days clean, and they're like different. Like, we ran 2 challenges. We ran one in April and we just ran one in mid-July. And like, you can see the difference in people. Like, I'm not just talking about weight shifts either. I mean, like, their eyes are brighter. Their skin is glowing. They're smiling. Their posture is different. They're confident. It's amazing. And so I think that's what people get from abstinence, not just like, I don't eat these foods because it ruins my life.
So you were mentioning that before, you were kind of still in that kind of Western model of dietitian, nutrition, and working, mainstream. And I'm wondering, did you go and speak about this different way of eating to some of your colleagues? Did you experience any pushback? Like, have you had others embrace this and ask questions about it?
So it's really funny because RDs, registered dietitians, that like see my resume, they're like, wow, this is a really interesting resume. But a lot of times when they get to talk to me, they're like, oh boy, this is too much, because I'm definitely a fringe guy. Like, I'm on the fringe, and I'm not inside the box at all. So it's really funny you asked that. So I've had people, I've had a couple dietitians like shadow me, watch me do groups, watch me teach. I think that most people probably think I'm crazy in my field, just because like they're going this way and I'm like over here, and I'm really, doing something different. I think the number of people that are RDs that I could recommend the client to, whether they're an addict or not, is like in the US is like 5 people. Like, it's slim pickings. So I think it's hard. I was asked one time at work what my superpower was, and I said, I don't eat sugar. That's my superpower. And they're like, that's not a superpower. And I'm like, it's my superpower. That's my superpower. Like, that's what gives me superpowers. I don't eat sugar. I have superpowers. But people don't get that. Maybe because they're not an addict. Maybe because they've never tried it. But like, I think that's my superpower. That's what gives me the power to do all these big, huge things when I face fear. It all started with putting the drugs down. When I put the drugs down, I could get off of other drugs. I got off caffeine later. I put up grain, sugar, and alcohol. I did that all on the same day. And then I got off of caffeine with like a 2-week-old, which I don't recommend. And then I later got off amphetamines. But it all for me started with getting the drugs out, which for me was the carbs. That was the first drug I probably used as a kid. So I know it's kind of an aggressive stance, but it's my experience.
I just am wondering, do you think these other dietitians that are out there, because I know when we were trying to find, dietitians, nutritionists to even interview for this summit, we had 5. So you're exactly right in saying that there is not many out there.
Sure.
And why do you think that the majority are unwilling to even consider that this might be a solution?
Odd. I mean, denial. We say denial stands for don't even notice I am lying. Like we all have denial. I mean, myself, you, everyone, we all push things aside that don't seem to fit into our mold of how we think things should work or things should run. I think that's part of it. I think people are scared. What does it mean to me if I can never eat sugar again? What does it mean? Like, how is that? What is it? Like, I'll tell you a story. My friend Mike, he was giving up alcohol and he went to his sponsor and he's like, well, what am I going to do at my daughter's wedding? And his sponsor asked him how old his daughter was. And he said, she's 7. So we like build up these things that make it so big and they're like so far away. Like, and those are the things that keep us from changing. So what do I say to these RDs and why are there so few? The other thing is commercially, the whole agency is being supported by organizations that claim to be healthy, but push sugar. So it's like big sugar, big food, like, as a dietitian, I could get continuing educations for free from Coca-Cola. That doesn't make sense to me. So it's they've done a really good job, I think, about convincing us that they care, and we believe them, and we're literally putting our lives in their hands. Like when I ask you, give me like 5 or 6 people who you would totally like put your life in their hands, it would be like a hard list to come up with. Yet, like, we're literally handing over our health to these large industries and you just don't even know it. And it's really scary.
Yeah. I mean, what you said, it reminded me of my experience in my own community as a dual licensed mental health and addiction counselor. The amount of just mental health counselors, the pushback around a substance use disorder, addiction in general, and the fear that's there. Like, you can't have these clients in the same building we're in. You're going to have to rent space somewhere else. Or,
right.
Oh, we don't talk about how much my client drinks. I'm like, why wouldn't you talk about how much they drink? Don't you think that could be impacting their mental health?
Sure.
Well, I just don't think it's important, right? So I think that what you're experiencing in the nutrition world is very similar to what is happening
stigma.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And not just stigma. Yes. And the fear of like, if I talk about it, then it's real. And then I have to do something about it. Not even like, oh, not sugar for the rest of my life. Like, if I actually say this thing, it makes it real. Like people who are afraid of suicide or their teenagers taking off in the middle of the night or something along those lines. It's like, he who must not be named, like say the name Voldemort, right? It's sugar, it's
I do
pizza,
that, yeah.
It's whatever. Absolutely. Yeah. So thank you for just shining a light on that, otherwise dark spot, I think.
I think it's scary. That, people aren't talking about the elephant in the room.
Right.
Why aren't they talking about it? Well, partly because they can't see it, which is scary.
Yeah. Yes.
And partly because they don't want to see it. I think, again, back to the denial. And then the stigma piece. I'm lucky. I live in Massachusetts and the William White papers came out of this general area. Yeah. So most of like the mental health clinicians, I think, they're pretty comfortable. I mean, I don't know. I haven't interfaced with that many therapists, but it seems like in this area, there's a little bit better, but it is a problem. I think that abstinence-based models have gotten a bad rap mainly because actually don't really know. I think the research isn't necessarily there to support it, but the experience of those that have done it is. So I think that we need research, but I'm not a research guy. Like, you want to know about the research, I'll send you to David Wiss, because like it's not my bag. Please, like I'm happy to send you to someone that knows it better than I do, because I don't know the research. Like, I don't get off by reading research studies. I get off in the trenches by helping an addict find a new way to live. That's what I do. That's what raises my spirit. So that's what I spend my time doing. And for me, it's an abstinence-based model, and that's not for everyone, right? So if you want to do a harm reduction-based model, I'll give you someone else's number. Molly, I know you've dabbled in that. I can give you her number or anyone else's number that does that. It's not a system that I like working in, because I just, because it's not what I believe in, right? Because I'm biased.
Sure.
So, yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that we need to, just like 12-step programming, right? We need to be a program of attraction, not promotion. And you're right. I mean, I don't dabble in it. I tell people all the time, I'm a harm reduction clinician, but that's how I've always been for years and years. I've been in substance abuse and mental health for 16 years. Like, that's just my belief system. That's my bias. Absolutely. Yeah, exactly. And I know, there a lot of times we say, hey, go talk to Dave, go talk to SugarX Global, whatever, because that is what they need. And that's what they're asking for. And they themselves, those clients themselves, are feeling, this isn't a great fit, Molly. Who do you recommend? So no, that's great. Thank you.
And that's important.
Yes. Thank you for calling that out. So in your experience, what is the number one challenge, or what are a few challenges that individuals struggle with finding the right food fit with the food plan, and getting that train moving down the train? And how do you help them? Because a lot of times they can't get right here until that food is cleaned up.
So how do we help them find like the right plan?
Yeah. Like, what are the challenges that they face in finding the right plan? Like, is it family members at home that are maybe accidentally or purposefully sabotage, that kind of thing? What do you find?
I think we all have saboteurs, whether they're doing it on purpose or not. I mean, I don't think our Auntie Susie is doing it on purpose, but it's just part of their culture. That's definitely something. I mean, I think other challenges are like social aspects of eating. I think that's a big thing for a lot of people. Like they want to have their cake and eat it too. You know what I mean? I'm not saying that literally, but they want to be able to like go out and still have a drink if alcohol isn't the problem for them, and do that. And the reality is that, alcohol changes the way you think. It just does. So, I think aspects like that are hard. Feeling like you're missing out. I think a lot of people look at routine like it's boring. I think boredom and routine are two totally different things. And so, fine tuning that aspect of your life so you don't feel like weighed down by like, because if you like ask someone else, like, I'm going to emulate your routine. What's your routine? Like, it's going to feel so uncomfortable for you. It's like, and I think that's happened a lot in like the 12-step world, where you're like, you just do what your sponsor does for your routine. And it's just like, it feels like so heavy because it doesn't fit your life. It fits their life. So I think that's a big challenge. I think guilt and shame too, they feel like they have to beat themselves up every minute of every day. And that's a lot. And I think that's the thing about healing the brain, is it enables us to move past a lot of that stuff. You start to accept the fact that you have a disease, and like, you don't get mad at your friend Steve because he has lupus. You know what I mean? It's for some reason, because you're an addict, you beat yourself up. I mean, there's something that's clicking differently with your brain. We actually have really special brains. Like, we look at it like the people in the past who were like hunters and gatherers. They were probably addicts. They're probably like, let's go get an antelope. Woo! Like they're just like revved up for life and action. And then their dopamine system just got hijacked along the years. And so I think we really have these really cool brains. And I think when I look at a room of addicts in recovery, regardless of the format of the room or the population or what they're doing for their recovery, I mean, they're some of the smartest people I've ever met. I mean, they're innovative, they're creative, they're intelligent, they're savvy, they're manipulative, but like in a positive way. So they can like adjust environments and jerry rig things and come up with solutions quick. So I think the brain is really special. It's just been on a detour for a long time.
I think what you said was so important there about finding your own organic fit and, not taking on like this routine of somebody else that worked for them and that's why they're doing it. I mean, if so, we've all tried every diet. Why did they not work for us? Right? Because that book wasn't written for us. So,
right, exactly.
Right. It was written.
You're reading the wrong book. Yeah.
Exactly. So I'm wondering, specifically because you work in this field, I'm a client, I'm coming to see you. I know Molly and I experience this all the time. All we want to do is talk about the food. We want to talk about the food. We want to figure out the food. What's the magic food? How do you transition individuals into figuring out this bigger piece? And what has worked well for you in doing so?
Yeah, we teach people about the brain. I mean, we teach people that the disease and the recovery can't be both engaged at the same time. It's not possible. It's just like, I can't have you focus on your breath and do math at the same time. You can't do it. It doesn't happen. So when we start teaching them about the brain and we break the brain down into these three parts, you have your brainstem. It's responsible for like super simple functioning, like breathing, heart rate, temperature. Like without that, you're screwed. You can't live. And then the next level up, you have like your limbic system, which people associate with the reward center of addiction, right? And essentially, if you've ever had a dog, you know all about the limbic system. It's like very reward-based thinking and punishment-based thinking. It's like, if I do this, I'll get a cookie. If I don't do this, I won't get a cookie. So you start repeating behaviors. And then you have this amazing, fantastic, super powerful human brain in the forehead called the prefrontal cortex, and enables us to like have sarcasm and a sense of humor, manipulate environments and people to our benefit, and like go around and, solve problems. The problem is if you're stuck in your addiction, you can't access it. So, like I'm on the way to the grocery store, right? My addiction brain, my reward center is like, I'm going for a reward. And my human brain saying, Dave, don't go to the grocery store. But I'm already on my way to the grocery store, knowing I shouldn't go to the grocery store. And then I go into the aisle that I know I shouldn't be down, but I'm going down it anyway. Then I'm at the checkout paying for the food that I know I shouldn't be eating, but doing it anyway, right? There's a disconnect between like my thinking and my need to fulfill a surge of dopamine or this neurochemistry. So when people, I think, start to understand that, it starts to break down this like guilt. It starts to break down the shame. Like they start to understand how the disease operates, and they start to realize, this isn't my fault. My brain is just wired differently. It's been hijacked. I have a virus in my reward center that's making me jack myself up with all the things that I'm trying to actually avoid. And then I think they start to get peace of mind. You see it in people. They like their facial expressions change. They're like sigh of relief, we focus on when we do a 5-day challenge, day one's all about the brain. It's all about the disease. It's all about what we call the red dog and the blue dog, like the red dog's the addiction. The blue dog is the recovery. It's all about who are you going to feed? Who do you choose to feed today? Like today, I choose to feed my recovery because I know what happens when I choose to feed my addiction. Right. And I'm unwilling to go there. So I think the brain is a huge piece because, and it's one of the things that I think is missing. I think that a lot of the places where people go to get recovery, they're either science or spiritual. And it's like, how do you be a spiritual scientific person? Well, it's easy. You be a spiritual scientific person. You take the facts and then you live altruistically. You get the insight you get from wherever you get it. And it affects you. So I think that a lot of people are looking for this one solution. And I think that's what we bring to the table is like, no, you need both of these things. You need to accelerate in both these areas. You need the knowledge, you need the information as it's coming out, like the science. But you also need to like grow. You need to learn techniques that ground you or keep you level or keep you growing And that's not information. We say information doesn't equal transformation, because how much information have you guys had about dieting and yet it didn't apply, right? You couldn't apply it. It just didn't. Like, most people come to me as a dietitian knowing more about dieting than me. That's the truth.
I mean, everything you just said, it's so true. Where I live, there's a major university, and many of my clients over the years, as you can imagine, have been professors from this university.
Sure.
And it's an engineering school. It is
Sure.
like all kinds of engineering. And some of those engineers were some of the most very hard science, some of the most spiritual people I've ever met, because
right.
They knew that they couldn't know it all, and that they didn't have these answers. They were being paid to seek answers that they just could not explain. Right. And so that's really like when, as an adult, I started realizing like, oh, maybe there is something to the spirituality thing. Here we've got people who dedicate their lives to seeking answers to like why there are avalanches and all these other things.
Right.
And they can't figure it out. And they're just like blown away by that. So thank you. Yes, absolutely. I really want to dive a little bit deeper into this, like how you help the clients move beyond the food, because in the early days, I think you're right. Our experience has definitely been, you get them educated, you start talking about like the brain and how it's wired, and how we definitely are already wired to double down on these dopamine hits, like all the things, right? And early on, they get it, right? But then we get into post-acute withdrawal, 3 to 6 months. It starts getting hard. Life starts getting lifey. Pink cloud is over. Now emotions are there, like things that maybe were seemingly easy in the beginning are becoming a lot more difficult. How do you keep people engaged in that recovery process?
Yeah. So it's funny. We have the 9-week program, and someone comes to us the first time we ran it in like week 5. We do 2 classes a week. On the second class of week 5, they're like, you know what I've noticed? You guys haven't talked about food at all. So we just don't focus on the food. Like, the coaches don't, the communities don't, the meetings don't, they just don't, because it's not the problem. It's our pseudo solution to the problem. So I think that we just drive people to focus on the root issue, which is that they're addicted. They have the disease of addiction. And then we focus on how do you treat that? And we when we're doing rooms and groups on things that are like people are dealing with, like, what do you do if your spouse isn't on board? That's like real life stuff you have to be able to handle, whether you're an addict or not. So I think that's a big part of it, is just like focus. We say focus stands for follow one course until successful. Like, you just have to put your blinders on and focus what you're focusing on. I think it's about diving deep, not diving wide. I think people sometimes try to focus on too much at once, and then they never really get anywhere. It's kind of what happened like with Caesar. Like, he just spread himself out way too thin, and then he didn't have the defense system he needed to maintain his sobriety or his abstinence or his clean time or whatever you want to call it. So I think that's a big thing, and we just don't talk about it. That's how we solve it. The other thing is, I think that's the disease, right? The disease wants you to focus on the food. That's the red dog. Yeah, but if you eat this will go away. Yeah, for a second. So I think helping people see, what I think people have a hard time doing is they have a hard time learning from their history. I think that they have a blind side. They're blindsided by their own history for some reason, especially addicts. So what the dynamic of the group does is it shows them themselves through someone else. And for some reason, it slips right by the ego, and it can knock yourself in. Like, you see people like nodding their head, and they're like, oh, yeah, that's kind of like me. No, that is you. Like, it is you. It's the mirror. And so, and I think that's the amazing thing about addicts recovering together. And I think that helps people see, like, we'll be like running a group, and someone will share, and someone will be like, that's your red dog. And you're like, oh yeah, that's my red dog. Let me reframe that. So it's really cool. So I don't think we I think we just focus on other things. And so it forces people to not focus on the food.
Yeah, no, that's so amazing. And I love what you were saying about like, why can't we, like, we're never operating from our history. It's like, we choose not to learn. And, you know, and here's what I know about the brain, right? Is that with trauma, addiction, that kind of thing, we actually have this enlarged amygdala and shrunk hippocampus. And the hippocampus is really responsible for a lot of those memories, right?
Yeah,
Carrying them. And so we are biologically impaired. Again, right? Another way that this disease impairs us is like, it's not even just that like we're in denial, that we're actively choosing to ignore it.
Sure.
It's been impaired by these by the substances and by the behaviors. And so I love what you said about like group in the mirror neurons, even, right? Where when we can see it reflected in us, those people are being our prefrontal cortex, a lot like when we work with clients individually, right? We act as the
higher
prefrontal cortex.
Power.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Right? That's what I mean. Like sugar is my superpower, right? Because now I have my brain back because I didn't when it was in.
Yeah.
So, and that's a superpowered brain. So largely when I'm in the disease of addiction, at best, I'm a dog. Like that's my highest level of thinking is like seek and destroy, reward.
Yeah. So in your years of experience, because you've obviously walked in different environments than Clarissa and I, or at least definitely different than I have, you know, what are the major factors that you see that clients, or the major characteristics or behaviors? What is it that you see that, you know, okay, this person's got it versus this person's struggling? So like, what are those factors that you see like in people who are able to get recovery long term?
Honestly, I think it comes down to vulnerability. That's the people that are moving, that are making progress, they're vulnerable. They're open. And I think that we do this great thing. We teach people vulnerability through The Wizard of Oz, because the characters are so iconic, and each character has what people in 12 step would call a spiritual awakening. Like the wizard, you know, the wizard humbles himself, right? You know, Dorothy realized that there's no place like home, like all these things. And each character has to be really vulnerable in the story. And so we really feel like that's the piece that's moving mountains. It's that willingness to be open to temporary suffering for long-term peace. I think that, and people who put the bat down, people who are able to put the guilt aside and say, you know, this is who I am. This is what I am, you know, and if I continue to do the things I'm doing, that person will not change. Right. And so you put that on top of vulnerability, and I think people move mountains. Yeah. And you mentioned post-acute withdrawal. Yeah, that's a bear. You know, it's a slap in the face. The reality is you're not ready for it. You could prepare for it and you wouldn't be ready for it. But that's how life is. You know, my mom says, be on guard for the unguarded moment. Right. And I think no one wants to go through this phase where they're like floating on a magic carpet, and they're living their best life, and all of a sudden, bam, you know, like the disease of addiction is like choking you. You need your peeps, you need your posse, you need your tools, you need to use them, and you need to get vulnerable. I think then that's hard for a lot of people. A lot of people, we did a group yesterday, and a lot of the theme from the people was they had controlling parents. Right. So does that surprise you? No, of course not. Of course it doesn't. But it's not a theme that an addict would think about. So I think it just goes to show you that we need each other.
Yeah, I just appreciate that so much, because honesty is so hard, right? And they always say there's like the longest journey is from your head to your heart, and to be able to like speak from the heart, right? How challenging that can be to face those hard truths. So I really
and to watch that
is beautiful.
It is some of the most beautiful thing. I found this guy on Instagram, Joko, what's his name? Joko. Can't remember his last name. He has Treacher-Collins disease. So he doesn't have cheekbones. So his face is a little, I don't want to say it's disfigured, it's different. But he's beautiful. And like, talk about a guy who's like willing to be vulnerable. Amazing. Inspiring. I mean, and that's the things that people get by working with other addicts. They get that realness, they get that rawness, and that's what helps them heal more than anything else. Doesn't matter the number of tools that you have in your toolkit. If you're not surrounding yourself with the kind of people that are ready and willing to be vulnerable to grow, it's going to be harder.
Yeah. And I think I always have the experience with individuals I'm working with and with myself that once you've been around those people in recovery who are vulnerable and who are so real, those normies, they just don't cut it anymore. Having those superficial conversations.
They're boring. Yeah. That's what Anna says. They're boring.
So we have a signature question.
Yeah.
And it is, if you could tell yourself, a younger version of yourself, something about food addiction, what would it be?
Let me think for a sec. I think honestly, it's not your fault. It's not your fault. You didn't do anything wrong. It's not baggage. It's actually a gift. It's going to take a while till you find that gift. You're going to have to chip away some of stone to find it. But I think that, like, you hear people and they're like, I'm a grateful recovering addict. And if you said that to me when I just started, I would say, like, what the hell is wrong with you? What the hell is wrong with you? When I first asked someone to help me and they said, I'd love to, I'm like, who is this guy? What is his agenda? But I think that just put the bat down and try to start processing through the shame, and talk about it. And it just gets lighter and lighter and lighter.
Love it.
Yeah,
great answer.
Yeah. Thank you so much for being here today, Dave. And we just appreciate you giving us your time and for everything you're doing with SugarX Global, giving us another resource to be able to refer people to. And one last thing, we know you have a book. What's the book? Let everybody know what your book is. It's
called The Fix for Cravings.
The Fix for Cravings.
I co-authored it with Cynthia Myers-Morrison. It's kind of an outline on how to do a group process to change your life. Yeah.
Awesome.
And the last thing I would just say is just don't. The one thing that you're never run out of is hope. So just know that you can do this, and there's always hope.
How can everybody find you?
Up.
Yeah, right. Yes. No, don't.
Sure. Yeah. I'm pretty active on Twitter at triggerfree_RD, sugarxglobal.com. That's the best place to find us. And all we, along with you guys, we moderate the Sugar Bomb in Your Brain. So we're all there too on Facebook.
Thank you so much.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. Have a great day.
You too. Take care, guys.
Thanks for joining us today on the Food Junkies Food Addiction Summit.
If you would like to hear more, tune in every Friday to the Food Junkies podcast, available on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, Audible, and anywhere else you listen to your favorite podcast. Subscribe so you'll never miss a show.
Don't forget to pick up a copy of Dr. Tarman's book, Food Junkies, which is available on Amazon.
If you have any additional questions, both Molly and Clarissa are food addiction professionals and work one-on-one with clients. Their websites and email addresses are available at foodjunkiespodcast.com.
As Vera always says, the power is ours.